Welcome to the Women Choosing Growth podcast, where we bring you practical advice and guidance on how to grow your business and achieve success in your entrepreneurial journey. We feature inspiring stories of success, challenges of growth, and lessons learned from women entrepreneurs, industry experts, and thought leaders who have been through the growing pains inevitable as an entrepreneur. Whether you are just getting started or are looking to scale up your business, our show is designed to provide you with the tools, resources, and community you need to grow your business. Join your host, Tina, a lifelong entrepreneur and business growth advisor, as we explore topics such as marketing, sales, finance, leadership, and personal growth, all tailored specifically to the needs of women entrepreneurs. So if you're ready to grow your business faster and smarter, and learn from the experiences of those who have traveled the growth path before you, then this podcast is for you. Thanks for tuning in, and let's get started.
Welcome to another episode of Women Choosing Growth. I am your host, Tina Sue. Today we have with us Amy Anderson. She is a wildly respected and creative industry leader with more than 25 years of experience at brands like Calvin Klein, 17, and the New York Times Digital, before being a co-founder of Wild Coffee Marketing. Building Wild Coffee from the ground up has allowed Amy to have a unique perspective on the entrepreneurial journey, especially as it relates to scaling startups with systems, financial formulas, and accountability. However, the biggest portion of her success comes from the culture she has built and how that team then shares that culture with the clients. With that being said, I am so excited to have you on the show, Amy. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Tina.
Amy, before we dive in, I really want to hear about your journey of how you became so successful today.
Oh, goodness. Well, I realized the other day it's 32 years of doing what I do. And I used to think that I would age out of this business or somehow I could become irrelevant in marketing and with everything digital and evolving. And really, I'm just figuring out that I'm just getting started. I was part of the era where liberal arts educations were fine and encouraged because we became critical thinkers. And I came out of college sort of directionless in some ways. I didn't know what I wanted to study. I had studied English and art history and ended up at 17 magazine in New York.
That's so cool.
And I was in their promotions and advertising department. This is the 90210 era. And Tori Spelling.
17 magazine goes back far.
It was the thing. I mean, Tori Spelling's walking through the office, and I never thought she would, come into a conversation about how I got to where I am. But I fell in love with advertising and marketing. And print was interesting to me, but I didn't feel that I could really understand the impact. We had subscriber rates, we had readers per copy. And so I went into broadcast and was doing broadcast advertising for Calvin Klein Cosmetics. So that's consumer packaged goods and the fragrances. And we're spending up to $100 million a year in the 90s on broadcast.
That's crazy.
The internet emerges. I realized I want to just do pure sort of internet play. And I joined the group that launched New York Times Digital in the mid 90s. It was the first media property that required registration in order to see content. And we were collecting sort of user data at that time. It was super ahead of its time. And from there, I've just really, really gotten to enjoy the consumer side of marketing and the B2B side of things, the emergence of digital. I was at a .com in the late 90s. And it wasn't until I had a major life shift and I got divorced and I had a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old boy. And knew that after taking a year or two off that I would have to go back into the workforce with a big job. And to support the family with a big job was a big endeavor at that time. And I really, really wanted to be with these boys. And so my parents were my angel investors and said, we will cover your basic living expenses for 12 months. See what you can do. And I started consulting. Little did I know that the thing that I was good at with marketing and strategy would be one of the things I ended up doing the least for a period of time because I actually went into finance, accounting, HR, sales as a business
Everything
owner.
but.
Everything but. And I'm glad I didn't know that, Tina. I think the fact that I was naive about how many businesses fail in their first year, why they fail, which is cash flow. All of these things, I think being a little naive about it and just really focusing on what I did best with a lot of optimism helped carry me through sort of COVID while business building, hiring, figuring out my formula, and still really trying to have a vision of transforming the in-house marketing model. I don't think it really works for most middle market companies in a digital first era. And I also, along the way, said, well, what am I really trying to create here? And ultimately, it's to make CEOs feel safe that my team and I have got it, and also to create a really, really good working experience for a group of smart people who I really love.
Love that. Let me ask you this. How long did it take you to figure out that formula?
I think 5 years.
Okay.
And that's too long. I knew sort of where the revenue was going to come from, what our target was. I knew how much my cost of goods really were from a labor perspective, but I think there are 4 layers deeper.
Okay.
You know,
Explain that formula. What is your formula? How did you come up with that?
what kind of work delivers the best net profits for you? And we're a professional services organization. We founded Wild Coffee 7 years ago. And, we are outsourced marketing teams for companies. So rather than them have a director and 2 managers in digital, they can come to us and say, these are our growth goals. This is our market. Can you figure out what we need to achieve the growth that we need so that we're strategy forward? We'll put together a digital team. We have an in-house creative services team. But how much does that cost you to deliver the service? How do you price it? And how much time does it take given your labor revenue, right? So we really have to look at what are our profitable clients? What's our profitable work? What type of staffing do we need? And now we actually use software that's inventory management of people and hours. So, the average person, whether we like to think about this or not, we work 160 hours a month in a 20-day business month, right? About 40 hours a week.
Yep.
If your team's taking PTO,
Which they should be.
Oh my gosh. Yes. We give 4 weeks and 2 days in their first year. I think it's very, very important, especially with the sort of the intensity of the work that we do. But if they're taking PTO and you've committed a certain number of hours to clients, how do you plan that? Where do they go? There's a certain complexity of a professional services organization where you need to manage time as inventory. How much does it cost you to deliver the work? What is your rate? And then how are you pricing that? So to really figure out all of those layers with a goal of 20% net profit, right, is where we are. But I mean, Tina, when I started this, I wasn't aware of any of those metrics. And as we've gone, how can you use technology to create elegance in that? Right? What tools can you use to create visibility, transform? We started with 0, ended up in QuickBooks, hired an outsourced CFO because bookkeepers look back, CFOs look forward.
Absolutely.
And I wish I had done that in year 2 and not year 5. I think that's where the real transformation came, is when we had an outsourced CFO on a fractional basis to help us sort of look at where profitable growth could come from.
That is my love language. I've had plenty of episodes on that. And as much as an entrepreneur I am, I do have that finance brain of looking forward, building, figuring out those nuggets that, like, what is missing? What are the levers that we can pull to make that margin bigger?
Absolutely.
Frankly, more
Even in
efficient.
terms, later this afternoon, I'm talking about specialization, niche, for agencies like ours. And we're more of a marketing consulting firm than an agency, but you do have to find what you're good at. How can you have a big repeatable service, right? Read any McKinsey report about, sort of the repeatable productizing your service, right? And figuring out that product market fit. Then what do you charge for it? Then how do you deliver it? And what's left at the bottom, right?
Right. Or start at the bottom
Yes.
and do that backwards.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
And that's where I think strategic planning comes into that, having a planning cadence, looking forward and saying, okay, we plan quarterly, we plan yearly, and 3-year.
Okay.
So that's our cadence. Every quarter, our senior team meets. We all contribute issues, ideas, topics, and we spend a full day to get to every single quarter to say, what just happened last quarter? Did we accomplish the goals we set out there? What
Mhm.
issues and topics do we need? And sometimes we'll do a little 1 year and 3 year planning in there. And then we cascade all of those messages to the team. So
Mhm.
everyone is aligned about what's on tap this quarter, where we're going. And I think people feel comfortable with that, Tina. And that's really important to me that, that the whole team is connected to the greater purpose and mission and that they know where we're going. Who wants to work in a company and you don't really know the why or how you're going to get there?
Those seem to be employees that are basically have a job and not part of the bigger picture. I've seen that in so many different companies, and I 100% is one of the things I work on with clients is like making sure that everyone is in a performance culture and understands like what are we as a collective, as a company driving towards or rowing towards or whatever analogy, all the people on the bus in the same direction, all the people rowing in the same direction, like whatever, they all need to know the big picture why and what are our goals and then hold accountability to it.
Absolutely. And, I think that connection to something bigger than themselves
Mhm.
feels like they have purpose.
Exactly.
And I don't know that coming up in my career that a lot of leaders were really concerned about my connection to a higher or greater purpose as
Not
part
in
of
our
what I
day.
did. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I was in New York in the 90s. There were no rules. There were no sort of strategies in place to make sure that team members and employees were treated in a way that was for their greater good and their well-being. So that's partly what contributed to my really wanting to create a warmth and a culture and a connection and connectedness, especially in a remote working environment. We founded the company in Miami, but it's always been remote. So I have a concentration of team members there and then 7 other states. So how do you create connection and purpose and
Mhm.
togetherness and culture when there are possibly 4 team members I still have not met in person?
Mhm. That was actually one of the questions I wanted to ask you because I knew that you are remote. So, how do you keep them feeling connected and driven towards the big picture when you can't see them at the copier like you could 20 years ago?
Right, right, exactly. Oh, the copier.
Right.
Oh, the
Like, that's
conversations we've
who even
had.
has a copier anymore?
I
Right.
know, and paper, you know?
Right.
Um, well, it's interesting. I think it needs to be purposeful. First of all, when we talk about the accountability layer, right? As business leaders, we're running a business and we have to make sure the work gets done. I'm
Mhm.
I am shocked when I hear, oh, this person in this team wasn't accomplishing things. We have systems in place and sharing of information that ensures that on a daily cadence, we track time, for example, which
Mhm.
helps in a business
Mhm.
like ours. We have a project management system we use that at the end of every day, everyone gets a prompt that says, what did you work on today? And that's people will put notes in there. And then it helps me every morning over coffee. I read through sort of where everybody is.
Mhm.
We have transparency in our project management system that we can see task time. So that's all that's sort of the operational aspects of it. I believe that weekly meeting cadences are important. And I believe that what you do with that meeting is important. I sit in the C-suite of maybe 3 or 4 clients currently as an outsourced CMO, and I sit in their executive team meetings. And those meetings are a lot about updates.
Mm.
People don't problem solve in there, and they don't share things that are important to them in there. It's really sort of here's my list of things I'm working on, and I don't know that those are effective.
I
For
would agree.
us, we start every meeting every Friday at 11, which is a sacred time of your best business moment of the week and your best personal moment. And we do that for a couple of reasons. Icebreakers are awesome. And I want to see what lights them up about their work. And I want to see what's happening in their lives. I want to know them. I want to be able to celebrate with them, family milestones, plans for the weekend. I figure out who likes what music.
Mhm.
And then I see what work they love. So I think that's a very important part of it too.
I think Friday's a great day for that. A little more relaxed, right? The big
Yeah.
projects are kind of winding down for the week. That makes sense.
Yeah, I do, and it's a way to sort of I think that we need rhythms and cadences. We really try not to book meetings on Wednesday afternoons externally. I think we may have fallen off with that recently because of how busy we are, which is not a bad thing either. We try to start internal meetings 5 minutes after the hour. And the reason for that is we go back to back to back because those are our
Mhm.
conversations. We're just meeting heavy, being remote, but give people 5 minutes to stand up and stretch.
Mhm.
or let a dog out, right? Or take a
Right.
quick clarity break, or God forbid, use the restroom, right? So
Yeah.
it's
Get some water.
yes, everyone's like sitting
Hydrate.
shriveled up at their desk, dehydrated, from all of that. But just to try to create space. And then Fridays, we sort of celebrate what happened with the week. We get ready for the next week. Though we have some announcements, and then we do client and employee shout outs.
Perfect.
And I want to hear how they're working together, how the team's collaborating, what sort of came together in terms of teams and people in order to deliver work for clients. And then Friday afternoons, we really try not to schedule very many meetings after 2 o'clock. Like,
Mhm.
get yourself ready for Monday. And so what I'm trying to support them is a space, the ability to think, winding down and having a rhythm to the week, because Monday we're ready to go again.
Mhm. I want to double down on what you said there about the content and the flow of meetings. I see that so much. So, for the listeners right now, do a little self check on your team's meetings, because so many of them are, here's what I worked on, like it's a report card, and here's, where I'm at. And it's not really the problem solving. Like, that stuff can be in a shared document. You read it prior to coming to the meeting, like, okay, here's where the team accomplished. Let's work on things together, that because we don't, if I was to give you an update on what I did for the week, we don't need to chat about it. That's in the past.
Well, there needs to be another way that you hear about that, right? So that "what did
Yeah,
you work on" prompt that comes out from our project management system,
exactly.
I see all those updates. I see what they're working on. We use EOS
Mhm.
as
Yep.
our operating system, right? Do
On
you know
that
what
shelf.
comes
Yeah, I was
up?
like, I think it's on that shelf right there, but it's actually on my bookshelf over here.
And I think that a number of things. First of all, it's based on a culture of accountability.
Mhm.
Instead of an organizational chart, you have an accountability chart, which makes so much more sense to me. Who's doing what? Who's responsible for what? And
Mhm.
that's very clear.
Love it.
Second is planning and meeting cadence, right? As you and I just talked about, meetings are not for up to how can you share information about what's happening, but you spend, what they call level 10 meetings,
Mhm.
problem solving. And it's IDS, right? Identifying, discussing, and solving problems. What other space? I think people need to sort of stop and think, what space have you created inside your organization to solve problems?
Mhm.
What operational systems have you put in place to share information? Right? Because that's the easy stuff,
Yeah.
This is
Read
what
it
I
over
did.
coffee. Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
you know, well, this is what I did, but hey, I have this idea. And an
Mhm.
issue, it's not always an issue. It could be a topic, it could be an idea, something innovative, a new way of doing things. And I think to create a culture where people, we talked about this, and we actually had a quarterly planning meeting last week. What did you accomplish this quarter, but how do you problem solve on a regular basis? And then what gets escalated into a planning meeting, or what gets escalated into a bi-monthly meeting, so that you can go in and say, look, guys, like, this isn't working for me. I tried to problem solve it this way. What do you think? And it's so incredibly productive to be able to do that with your team.
I agree 100%. So let's talk a little bit more about your culture, because I know you have a culture theme.
I do. I do. So I think I give this talk a lot, and I had to create structure around where do you start, because I don't think you can pick culture out of thin air. You could say, I want a culture of this, but it really needs to start with your mission vision. What are you trying to accomplish? What's your higher purpose? Then you have a set of values around those, right? What behavior and attitude do we embody every day to accomplish our vision, right? So for us, energy is everything. We pivot, we walk as one with our clients. We have a culture of lifelong learning, and we hire and reward our team members based on those values. So they're very present. Every quarter, we go over the values. In our shout outs, we say, hey, Maylee was living the culture of lifelong learning because she brought 4 webinars to us and we learned X, Y, and Z. On top of that layer, the culture for me, it is critical that it was based on kindness. And it was something I knew that I wanted to create for a number of reasons. First of all, I mean, it's obvious, right? We spend so much time with
Mhm.
work, right?
Mhm.
And I felt a responsibility to my team members' families. And what I mean by that is that they are going home, or they're walking out of their room into the rest of the house, right? At the end of their workday. And what are they bringing to all of those people? If everyone lives with an average of 3 people, that's 60 folks that are impacted by our team member on a daily basis. And I really, really wanted them to leave the day, leave the week, and go into the weekend with a feeling of psychological safety, happiness, contentedness, accomplishment. And in order, I believe, to do that, if we don't have cooperation and kindness throughout the organization, we won't be able to accomplish that. And so I had flown everyone in 2 years ago. My business partner Salo and I had brought everyone into South Florida, and we were having an annual meeting. And I really wanted to show them a tangible example of what I was talking about. And I found a video of a turtle that was on its back and struggling. And Bob Seger's A Little Help from My Friends was playing in the background. And I was so excited. Tina, I had it in the deck and I was ready to click this link. And I had all this build up about what I wanted to do and what I was trying to show them. And the link didn't work. And I was so embarrassed too, because I mean, to be perceived as non-technically savvy is a trigger for me. And I tested it for whatever reason, it didn't work. But what did they do? 3 people came rushing to the front of the room to help me. And what was in the video was the same thing. These turtles came to the turtle that was on its back and helped flipped it over. And I said that, you guys just embodied everything I was just trying to show you by helping me and running to the front of the room about this culture that we now call flip the turtle. And it has become part of our vernacular. We're like, well, guys, look at what's on the schedule for next week. And a Friday meet, we are going to have to flip the turtle quite a bit next week. And we have Flip the Turtle awards too, and it's really that culture. We reward them for going and helping and flipping the turtles, because I believe that unless we're doing that people will not have a good experience at work.
I love it. And when we had our first pre-call, I don't know how many times I have repeated that story for other people. So you are now touching people you've never even met. And you will with that story shared here today. But I love that analogy. I'm very visual, so like I can completely see, your team rushing to the front to help you from this being on your back. Hey, incredible women entrepreneurs. It's Tina Sue here. I know you're juggling a lot, growing your business, managing family time, and trying to find balance. Deep down, you know you're capable of so much more, but maybe fear or uncertainty is holding you back from achieving that dream business, that dream life that you deserve. That's why I created the Dream Big, Plan Bigger guide, a game changer for your business growth. This isn't just another goal-setting document. It's your personal roadmap to achieving the impossible. Imagine having a clear vision of your biggest dreams, breaking through the barriers that hold you back, and reigniting that passion that fuels your journey. This guide is your roadmap to doing just that without compromising your family time or your personal priorities. You deserve to see your business thrive and still have time for what you love. Let's take this journey together. Download your free Dream Big, Plan Bigger workbook now at tina-sue.com. and start making those dreams a reality. Now, let's get back to the show.
I was on my back big time in a Google sheet, or in a Google slide. And it's interesting because I look for it in team members. I look for drive. We do behavioral interviewing. We have a core set of competencies. We use Kolbe as our work inclination test. I used Myers-Briggs in the 90s, but it's really to understand what is the impulse of the person and how do they work? Are they a fact finder? Do they just do things? And that's a quick starter. I'm a heavy quick starter. I don't need a lot of research. I can just go and sort of fake it till I make it, but we understand that about each other. So I think you have to put in place systems and behaviors that support the culture, right? Shout outs, handwritten notes to them, encouraging balance and taking PTO, seeing people as their whole person. They're not employees. They work on a team that at a company that I created out of a need and want to be with my children. So for me, like my sort of core reason for starting to consult, and now I've learned, Tina, and you and I talked about this, that I'm a builder and I can't stop. I didn't know. I always thought that maybe I was sort of an amazing cello player, but had never played cello before. And that, did I have this secret hidden talent that had never been tapped? I had always said, I'm a corporate person. I'm not an entrepreneur. I will always work in a corporate environment. And then out of necessity, I started
Mhm.
consulting, and then I learned that I'm actually a builder and I really enjoy it.
Mhm. And we talked that we have longevity in our future, like in our grandparents and whatnot. So maybe you and I are going to be continuing to build well into our 90s.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe it'll take different forms. Maybe I'll
Yep.
be more of an advisor than a business
Mhm.
leader. And then I think what has evolved is that, I was setting up my mic earlier today and I said, how is it that I was doing social media for a wedding planner in Miami 7 years ago, having never worked outside of a corporate environment? And now I'm adjusting a mic to talk to you about how I did this. And it's
Mhm.
very surreal in those ways. But, someone asked me recently, what do you think are the most valuable qualities of an entrepreneur? And I really think that naivete helped me.
Yes.
I didn't know what I didn't know and just kept going with a lot of optimism and belief that I could and not really knowing where I'm going. So I don't think you have to have a plan. I do think you have to have a formula. And I do think you need to be very protective of your cash flow and sort
Yep.
of costs and having that, because without that, you have no business. Without selling all the time, you have no business.
Mhm.
Right. So,
Yep. I can completely relate to that, and I think it sounds like for both of us, it was really our why that was driven. A lot of being naive and the fake it till you make it, but it was all in pursuit of same reason. I was in corporate finance, HR, but we had fertility issues. Finally, got pregnant and was like, I don't want to be in the corporate world, like at a corporate job for 60, 70 hours a week. When I finally got this beautiful miracle, so that's when I started my business, but it was always in pursuit of the reason I faked it till I made it and was taking clients that I really didn't want to in the beginning was because I had to in my mind in order to pursue this dream. So I
absolutely. And
think it's really being clear on that why.
yes. And I think that necessity is not a bad motivator.
Mhm.
As
I think it's great.
as a single parent,
Mhm.
I said to somebody recently, I love what I do and I'm so fortunate because I also have to do what I do because I'm solely responsible for putting food on the table. And sometimes, it feels a little unnatural. There's this part of me as a mother and as a woman that would love to just be sort of nesting and making everyone dinner and lighting candles and putting flowers out and making sure that everybody, all feelings are safe here, but not all behavior is sort of one of our mantras, and just making things amazing for these boys.
Mhm.
Um, and it goes outside of my comfort zone to go hunt the way that I have to. But why not just recognize that and
Mhm.
see it and say, well, yeah, that's my inclination. Today, I would love to be cooking for everyone all day, but instead I'm in 7 new business development meetings, putting together scopes, negotiating, and being a little bit outside of my comfort zone. But I think that's really rewarding too.
Mhm. You know what the best part is when other people that are close to you recognize the fact that you sort of enjoy being uncomfortable. My other half just was telling his daughter that this morning. We were in the car and he says, just so you know, Tina loves being uncomfortable. She actually looks for things that make her uncomfortable because if you're not uncomfortable, you're not growing." And he was like teaching the 20-year-old that in the back seat. And I was like, that's interesting to hear someone
Yeah.
else give that perspective. But driven women like you and I and those listening, we kind of do want to be uncomfortable. I would love to sit home and watch Netflix. And some of those days that I've tried to do it, I make it till about noon.
Yes, I took my son out to breakfast yesterday
Mhm.
and snuck out. He had to get a quick lab test. And I said, let's go eat. And it was interesting to come back to my desk and I felt uncomfortable because, I'm in here, most days 8 to 7. And I
Mhm.
close the door and I treat it like an office. And I never thought I would have that discipline, but I also have to recognize I encourage space, breaks, time with family of my team.
Mhm.
The flexibility of that. How can they work that in? I don't ever want anyone missing a recital, a swim meet, anything like that. So I have to walk my own talk with that and stop and say, my son's home for 3 more weeks this summer. Let's go get breakfast. So I think that's
Mhm.
important.
It is. Yeah, it's a little that uncomfortable, right? Like, what am I missing for a couple hours while I'm should be, quote unquote, should be at my desk.
Right.
that,
And so the
that happens.
shoulds, the would be, ought to
Mhm.
be, maybe, could be. I try to stay away from those as much as possible and stay in this place of what is, and not put these expectations on myself. I do work very hard. So does my entire team. And I'm sometimes more focused on their balance and rewarding them than I am on myself. So that's something. But as I said to my son this week, I've been doing this since my 20s.
Mhm.
When I lived in Manhattan for 8 years, I was in pursuit, and it wasn't financial gain, it was responsibility and learning. I wanted more sort of authority and responsibility inside organizations. And I also think you can be very entrepreneurial in a corporate environment. And I believe now that I look back, I think, oh, wait, I did bring ideas to the table and I did try to look for new ways and better ways of doing things. So you can be an entrepreneur in a corporate environment. It's a mindset.
Mhm. And a lot of leadership positions are that, where they're leading a team, sort of a mini business, if you would, within a larger
Absolutely.
organization. So, absolutely, a lot of leaders listen to our podcast too. One question that I know, as we're talking about like our gut and like who we are versus the data, like how do you manage and help make decisions, especially thinking into the future of, between balancing that creativeness, because that's what your whole team is really, is
Mhm.
creative minds, along with the data. That's something that I hear is hard. Data says this, but my mind and my creativeness wants to do this.
I find that I speak things into existence for a reason because something came up in me. We talk about channeling, or,
Mhm.
I see my son playing soccer, and since he was 3 years old, he channels from somewhere else. It's his zen and his flow when he's on the ball, when a lot of players maybe panic. It's when he's at his most peaceful. And it's very interesting for me to watch.
Hmm.
When a thought comes to me or an idea, it came from somewhere. And when it comes repeatedly, I know that I need to speak it into existence, and then I know that I can make it come. So it's those thoughts and those like glimmers that I have that I know is my gut. And I must have been gathering data from a lot of different places to come to that. And then balance it with data behind that. An
Mhm.
example of this is, for 3 or 4 years, I have had a vision of working with private equity backed companies.
Mhm.
I love growing businesses and I love growing my own. And that is a growth mode. And someone had said to me, no, that's not a market for you. The holding period and the investment horizon is too short. They're just financially, sort of restructuring to get the multiples they need to sell the company. You have no place there. And I just said, I got to think that there are investment periods that are longer, that there are partner friendly and founder friendly private equity firms in this middle market. And I
Mhm.
believe that middle market companies, every one of them needs a CMO, but can't necessarily afford one, nor do they need one full time. But they could really benefit from the strategy that a CMO brings on a fractional basis.
Mhm.
And I held on to it, Tina, for years. And now we work with 6 private equity firms servicing their portfolio for opportunities where there is growth through sales and marketing strategies. And so what I was told over and over again couldn't work. And maybe the data supported that. They're like, what is driving multiples in the private equity backed market is sort of financial engineering, right?
Mhm.
Cost containment, and not necessarily growth through sales and marketing versus add-ons and M&A. We are now finding that sort of the middle market is getting flooded with private equity activity, and they're looking for a sophisticated firm that can sort of look at their growth objectives, put strategy behind it, and say, okay, are we aligned on strategy? Here's the creative services team I have in-house to carry everything out.
Mhm.
And so there's an elegance to the model that I was told and the data didn't support for a long time. So I think to really listen to the ideas and the intuition, and sometimes it may take a few years, but you can eventually drive there.
Yeah, and I think what you said is true about a lot of things where people say, "Oh, the market is this," or "Oh, that's not for you because of this." But the majority of M&A, usually it is a flip in 5 years, but that's like the average. There's still the outliers, which is what sounds like you're working with, and or anyone else can too. And just because the majority of X, Y, and Z happens in this box doesn't mean you can't go after the whatever percent that isn't.
Right, and there's
So
a lot
I
you
love
can
that.
accomplish in 5 years, right?
Oh my
Once
gosh,
they
yeah.
get once they get the people situated in these partnerships. Once they have the technology and ERP, together in these systems, where does the growth come from?
Mhm.
Even in these niche manufacturing B2B markets, we are seeing huge opportunities to really refine message and branding and then do lead gen. And we also advise them on sort of what we're seeing in sales activity, what's happening in the market. We're bringing innovation marketing to the table for them, saying, have you considered this one segment? So we really sort of partner with them, and we found a place to exercise our strategy muscle. And it's been a lot of fun.
Yep. So glad you listened to your gut and followed it up with the data.
Absolutely.
Any last advice for these women listening, and really the culture, the building the formula for growth? I mean, we talked about a lot of things here, leadership, like all the things. Like, what is your kind of button on the advice for them?
Well, what was transformative for me was to benchmark data for companies like mine and to really look at sort of small, medium, and large professional services or agencies like mine.
Mm-hmm.
What is their growth rate on average, right? I learned that for firms like mine, it's 15%. Well, I'm at 36, over the last 3 years.
Wonderful.
What
Congrats.
is, thank you. What net profits? Be like, what numbers are you there? So getting that formula down and benchmarking where you should be. I
Mhm.
also believe that this problem solving sort of meeting cadence and planning is integral. Like, I think we've always done it, but we would do it in a way to say, okay, for this quarter, we need 2 new retainers and 1 project. What does that mean?
Mhm. That's
Where
great.
should they be? Right? What does the product market fit? Which projects and clients are more profitable? What is my ideal client? Where do I find more of those? So I think we could have been a bit more intentional in our business development efforts, even though I've never advertised. I'm like the cobbler's children who have no shoes. We have never advertised Wild Coffee, but we've had a strong referral base, and referrals is not a strategy.
Yep.
Those are great and should be great sort of, top line projects, but we
Yep.
got much more intentional with business development. It's been transformative for us. And then just sort of the relentless pursuit of how can I do this better?
Mhm.
Sit down and sort of look at those numbers. I buy these notebooks with papers in the middle that are a different color. And those are my thoughts, strategic initiatives, benchmarking data for the business, something I want to read or learn about. And I keep that like mini Bible to myself in the middle of every notebook so that when I have time and space on weekends, or I can go and say, okay, how am I going to how can I work on the business and
Mhm.
not work in the business? And I think we need to do those checks. Am I in my business right now, or am I working on it?
Love it. I also have a separate journal that is my random, wild-eyed, like sky's the limit thoughts that I just throw in there, and then I have another looks almost the same size, different cover for like the everyday kind of thoughts and notes. But I specifically will go get the one that is for like I might do something with this someday, so I'm going to write it down.
I love it. And mentors. I hadn't really had them, and now I've sought out multiple people to sit down with and have coffee with, and have them sort of grill me a little bit and say, like, talk to me about the model, tell me what's working, and
Mhm.
advise me on sort of growth. I had someone say, do not get into these 2 verticals because you don't have the expertise for it. Stick here. Your pitch sounds great here. I would refine it here. What percentage of net profits on a monthly basis are invested back into the business? And so when you have people asking you and guiding you, it sort of opens your eyes and helps you sort of benchmark where you are, gives you new ideas. And that's recent for me. That's been in the last 12 months that I've really sought that out, to just grow as a leader. And I think we could
Mhm.
all use them.
Yes, absolutely. As an advisor, I agree.
Yes.
That's
Absolutely.
really and honestly, that's why I became an advisor because that was a pivotal moment in my business too, of when the first couple years I was faking it till I
Mhm.
was going to make it someday. And then joined a performance group with advisors and a team of people that I had to share things that I would have never shared before. And that was really when it like, oh, okay, like I can learn from these people. And there was the accountability piece and all the things. So that's why I absolutely love being an advisor today because that it's huge when you have someone else looking at it and giving you outside advice that's not in your day to day. It's huge.
Absolutely. And we get that too. I report to a fractional CFO. who has
I love it.
CEO experience. And I think that if someone's using a bookkeeper, right? We talked about looks behind, CFO looks forward. He has CEO experience and he just offers a perspective. And plus it gives me sort of a touch point to say, I need to run this by Tony. When I'm developing new strategies, when I am looking at sort of productizing new areas of the business and our service, I have somebody to talk to about that. My business partner and I are sort of in it together. We've worked together in different capacities for 20 years, but to have somebody else with a finance mind to run that by. So whether it's an advisor like you, it's a finance professional, it's a performance management group, I think it's really important to have that sort of outside influence for you. And that's been a big difference maker for me over the last 2 years.
Yep. Agree totally. I absolutely love everything that we've covered here today. I feel like we could talk for another 3 hours and be on the same page with our story of the last couple decades. So I appreciate you.
Thank you so much for having me on.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Please be sure to hit subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. The Woman Choosing Growth Show is not just another podcast. It's a tribe of women helping each other grow. So please share this podcast with all the women entrepreneurs that you would love to see succeed. If you'd like to know more about customized business advising through Cultivate Advisors, download business tools, or sign up for upcoming events, visit www.womenchoosinggrowth.com. Once again, that's www.womenchoosinggrowth.com. Remember, we are in this together. See you on the next one.